So once again, welcome to another session on Python. Today we're going to be talking about just data in general, the importance of data, big key term right now, this thing about big data that we may hear a lot of. So today we're going to be talking about manipulating data, different data types in Python, how to create data, data types, data variables. Really cool. So this is going to be a really key lesson for us, really key lesson, because if you can understand this, you'll be able to build, start to build like bigger data structures, write more complex algorithms, and then even create like these objects, like your own custom objects. We're going to talk about the built-in data types today, and then we're going to talk about how you can even build your own. So we're going to get going. So there's a few different types of data types in Python, some built-in things. All right. So, but before we get to it, the first thing I wanted to show you was like a real world example of when data types will be important. Some of the data types I'm talking about are like strings. You probably heard of a string, which is just like a series of characters, right? Like a phrase or a word or a statement, something like that, right? That's a string. And then you may have heard of a number or int, which stands for integer. And then we have things like a list or an array, which is just like a collection of items, an ordered collection of items. Tuples is another one. We're going to talk about those today. But first, I want to show you, before we get just into these concepts of why do I need a list or what's a tuple, first, I just want to kind of show you where we would use it at, and then kind of like make that connection really seamless. So this right here is a typical admin dashboard. If you haven't heard of an admin dashboard, that's usually like the back end of a website where you can manage different data, right? Instead of looking at the database directly, usually people on a team at a company, there's somebody who has access to a dashboard, and that dashboard can tell information about the users. It can tell information about the different staff members. It may even talk about different posts, like on WordPress, for example. You see all of like the different posts for a specific blog. So there's many different things you can display on this admin area. Usually there's a table on there, and that table kind of like represents some of the data in the database. So right here, it's kind of not too zoomed in. Maybe see if I can zoom in a little bit. But if you can see that, or if you can't see it, let me know. So this is a table right here, and it has all of the users, right? Just pick any kind of company who has users, and just imagine this being their database, right? So you have a few different what we call columns, right? And across the top, you have username, status, email, register, and last login. Each one of those are a column, okay? But something else that you may see is like it's the same structure going all the way down, right? So because of this structure, the reason why we're able to have this is because of different data types. Each one of these columns has a data type associated with it. For example, username, right? Username is a string. It's just a string. It's Batman, Melon, Percy, Spider-Man. All of these different words are they get stored into a variable that's a string. If you ever see a bool stands for Boolean. And it's like a true or false. It can hold a true or it can hold a false value. That's it. So for example, is the customer registered? Yes or no. If it said not registered, that would pretty much mean the opposite of true, which will be false. Email is also a string, right? It's just a series of characters. Registered, it's a date object, and a date is what we call a module. And that's going to be key. We're going to talk about that later. Module is just in general. It means you can create your own module. So something more custom. So date isn't a built-in Python type, but it was created by the Python developers and gives us access to easily create dates, format dates, subtract dates from each other. If you're trying to figure out what was the difference between two dates. Like if you insert in, okay, such and such was born February 1st, 2010, and then the other person was born on January 1st, 2013. What's the how many months in between, or how many years in between? There's functions for that. So that's just something built in, and we can build our own modules as well. There's also like another type called float, right? So float is kind of like an int, but pretty much as more precision. So integers are usually like no decimals, but then ints can really get more in depth. Like they can be instead of just 12, like an int, a float would be 12.1113, so far so on. It can add a lot of numbers. There's even something called a double, which we'll talk about as well. And double is even more precise than a float. So these are just, I just want to show you, like, when we get to talking about variables and data types, I want you to see that there is a real world example for these things. Okay. So this is like, once again, this is just a typical table that we have, and the rows represent each item in the database, and the columns just pretty much represent the categories and what we'll be looking after. But we'll talk more about that later. Right now, I just want to focus on the different data types. There's two other data types I want to talk about, right? So this is where we go back to what the row is. Each row can be stored in a data type called a dictionary. A dictionary is just like this collection of name and value, or key and value type of properties. So for example, in our example that we just had, username, status, email, registered, those were all different columns, right? So each column item would be a key. So that's how this is set up. We're going to talk more about this in detail in this lesson right here for sure. And I'm going to show you how to create these dictionaries, how to add to them, how to access them. It's pretty cool. And then if you just want to go a little bit further and you want to see, well, how would I use a list? A list is separated by these brackets, and we're going to come back to this too by the end of the lesson so you can really see it. But the list is separated by these brackets, and all the items are between it. So we can literally add for each one of the rows in this table. As you see, we have Batman, Melon, Percy, Sparky. Each one of those, like I said, is a dictionary. It can be held in a dictionary. And the reason why I say that is because dictionaries make it easy to pass data around, especially like a group of data. We could have just passed along a bunch of strings, but it's harder to like organize that data and access it later on in an efficient way. So I want you to think of dictionaries as a unique mechanism to make it easier to store data. I want you to think the same thing for lists. I want you to think the same thing for strings. They all have their own specific purpose, and you just have to figure out how to use it. If you want to pass around numbers, make sure you make it an int or a float or a double. Don't put a number like 100 and then in quotation marks if you really want it to be a number. So that's why data types are important. They all have like characteristics with them, and some even come with built-in functions, which you'll see. Like you can do certain things to a string with built-in function that you can't do with a list, for example. So yeah, let's actually get into it. What I want to do now is I want to open up a terminal, right? And we could just kind of go through it and see how that goes. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? So just to talk about the ones we're going to go over today, we're going to talk about strings, integers for sure, float. We're going to talk about dictionaries. We also going to talk about a list. Okay, so what I'm opening up right now is just a terminal, a Python terminal. You can get there by going to your command line or your terminal. Let me exit out of it. And then once it's open, you can just type Python and it should open up for you. Some people may have to type Python 3. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay, cool. This up. Oh, okay, I think Iman, who's that? Iman said, what's the difference between the two? Yeah, the difference between, you mean a list and a dictionary? I think that's what she's talking about. So for one, I think the main thing is the ordered process. So a dictionary does not have to be ordered. So I'm going to show you here in a second, creating a dictionary. You can change around the key values. Each one is separated by a comma, right? Each item in both the list and the dictionary, they have these items separated by commas. In the list, they're in a specific order, and that order is important, so it won't change in the background. A dictionary, the order can change, and it doesn't really change the object at all. Okay, so I'll show you. This is how we create a list. I might zoom in a little bit more for you guys. My list equals, I'll just put some numbers in here. 1, 2. So this is just a list of numbers. All right, so that can't change around. That order is very important for that list, okay? Because when I go and I this is how you access things. If you want to get a specific, for example, if I say number 2 equals, and if I want to get the number 2 out of this list, you use a bracket, right? The square bracket, and you type the index, which is pretty much the location of the value you're trying to get to. So you need to know what the value is of the number that you're trying to get to, or the item that you're trying to get to. So you type that, this is the syntax where you say the list name, then you use these brackets to access it. So if I want to access the 2, right, this is the key thing. The 2 is at the 1 index, because in pretty much all programming languages that I've ever come across, there's when counting in a list or an array, you always start at 0. So the 1 is at the 0th index, the 2 is at the 1st index, this 3 is at a 3 index. I got another 3 as well. I didn't notice that. But so yeah, you type 1 if I want to access that number 2 right there. So that's just how you access it. So now number 2, this variable has my value, and you see the number 2 gets printed out. So the order is very important when it comes to accessing items in an array. Okay. So with an array, you use brackets like this, which is the square brackets, and in a dictionary, we use the curly braces. So this is how we create, for example, a basic dictionary. In a dictionary, think of it as more like a complex object. It can hold more data, a little bit more like structure to it. So I'll give you an example. If I want to say my personal info, right? I will put this in a dictionary because I can do stuff like add a name. So you put the key, which is, I'm going to show you why they call this the key, because you're going to need the key to access the value. So key, name, and then my name is, I'll just put Antoine Digital, and then so comma. So with the comma, I can add my next item. Oops. Okay, so my next item will be, let's say, my date of birth, right? And then I will put whatever that may be. Okay, then I put another comma, and I'll just put fave color. And you always want to make sure you wrap your keys in double quotations. If it's not in double quotations, you will get an error. Oh, watch this. I can also do fave number, and then I'll equal it to number 2, because number 2 is a variable up above, like you already see. Okay, so now I close it out with a curly brace and press enter. Oh, and it says I have an error. So my error is, let's read through this error. Trace back, most recent cause, last. It's saying, this is what I want you to look for, where it's at, line 1. So because we're in a terminal, line 1 is the last thing that you typed. Okay, name error. That's what the name error is, the type of error that it is. They're saying like, hey, you called the name, you used the name that we're not familiar with. It doesn't show up. More specifically, name fave number is not defined. So it lets us know exactly where the error is, which is cool. So to retype this, because I see what my error is, if you look, I forgot my quotation marks across my key, right? I don't have to put them across my variable. I think I spelled that wrong. 2 is supposed to be number 2. So this is supposed to be number 2. That was one typo. And then around here, you're supposed to add double quotes. So if you press the up key in the terminal or in the command line, it retypes your last line. I'm not sure if you knew that already, but it'll stop you from having to type the whole thing over again. Okay. So now it got saved correctly because I didn't get any error messages. So just be careful, not be careful, but don't be intimidated by these messages. Take your time and just see if you can kind of decipher what they're trying to tell you. Okay. Yeah, I can. Okay. Yeah, hope that's better, Ben. Let me know if that's better. If not, I'll increase it some more. Okay. So now this is our dictionary, right? We just set up a dictionary, and this has our info in it. So as you notice, I could just get a little bit more in here in different type of data types. You see I have in here a string, another string, because my name is a string, Antoine.digital. Date of birth is a string, but fave number, I actually save this as an integer because it's going to be equal to the number 2, right? So if I type my personal info, so that's pretty cool right there, is that you see I have a string saved, another string saved, but then an integer. A dictionary allows you to add multiple different data types inside of one object. Everything doesn't have to be a string. Everything doesn't have to be a number, right? I could even put a list inside of here, right? If I wanted to, I can, I'll show you more about that later, but I can even add a list here or a tuple here instead of just a number. So it's pretty cool. Okay, did that answer your question, Iman? As we work through more of these examples, it'll make more and more sense to you. But yeah, let me know. Great question. You're welcome. You're welcome. So yeah, like I said, the list is, I'll type it right here. A list is a collection which is ordered, and also it's changeable, right? That's one thing about it. We can change items around. We can pop one out. We can add new things into it. We can add things at specific spots, or we can take things away at specific spots. So it's really cool how lists are set up. I got some reading for you guys to go through so you guys can go deeper into it, because it's an abstract concept, and I just want you to make sure you really dive deep into it. I won't do it justice trying to explain everything about it in just this session. But the cool thing is it does allow for duplicates. Okay, so you can't add duplicates inside of a list. However, with the dictionary, you cannot add duplicates. So as you see, I had 1, 2, 3, 3 over here. But then I still was able to work. It still was able to print out for me. If I wanted to add something into my dictionary that had the same key name, it wouldn't work. And I would get an error, or it would overwrite whatever I had there before. And the reason why that's a case is because accessing a dictionary is done by the key. So the key has to be unique. So there can't be double keys. There can't be multiple of the same keys in the dictionary. So for example, if I wanted to access my name, let's say I wanted to print my name from that dictionary, I would say my personal info, and then pretty much I type name. So you use a string, and you put in a string, you put which key you want to access. So quotations, you can use double quotes or single quotes. Either one would have worked, right? Either one. And I'm just printing that to the screen. I'm not doing anything special. Oops, I forgot my printer. See, so I didn't do anything special. I just accessed. If you see, I just say print my personal info name. That's how you would print out name. If I wanted to print out my date of birth, I would access it this way. Okay, DOB. So if you didn't see the syntax, you just literally type the dictionary name, and then you type in between it what the key is as a string, date of birth, and I get 11190. So it prints that right out. Okay. So yeah, once again, thank you, Nicole Munir. If you want to just repeat the line that you just typed, just press up on the keyboard. You can go back to it and do a quick edit. So I want to edit this and say, okay, what is my fave number? 2. Okay. So that's really cool right there too, because 2 really has become my favorite number. Kind of crazy. I didn't even mean to do that. Yeah. So is that cool? Does that make sense right there? Just this whole idea of like why a key has to be unique. If you create in a dictionary, it cannot have the same key. Okay, they cannot have the same key. Name. This can be the only key in this whole dictionary that has a name in it. Okay, and what Alex said too, he said lists are great for large data sets. That's true. You can put a lot of information inside of a list.